It began with light. A flash on the horizon, white-hot and silent. Then the sky tore open. In what is now Sumatra, the ground split as the Toba supervolcano erupted with a violence almost beyond comprehension. Ash rose 40 kilometers into the stratosphere, blotting out the sun across half the Earth. It didn't just affect a region, it strangled a hemisphere. Across South Asia, India, Africa, darkness fell. Not night, not cloud. A toxic twilight that choked the air and blocked the stars. Subscribe to MystiFeed. It lasted not days but years. This wasn't a disaster. It was an extinction. Within weeks, rainfall patterns collapsed. Monsoons vanished. Crops where early agriculture flickered, withered before they could sprout. Wild game either fled or starved. Herds that once fed nomads vanished into the silence. In East Africa, the birthplace of our species, the land hardened. Lakes shrank. Dust storms swept across once verdant plains. And humans still new, still fragile, began to die. We had fire. We had flint. We had spears tipped with obsidian. But none of that mattered now, because nothing hunts like the climate. Ash fell like snow over ancient rivers. Some bands tried to migrate north only to find cold winds blowing down from a new, rising wall of ice. Others pushed inland, seeking shelter in caves, carrying with them only crude tools, fire sticks, and hunger. We don't know how many died, but we know this: most did. Some estimates suggest the global population of Homo sapiens dropped below 10,000. Others say 2,000. Not a civilization, not even a tribe. Just scattered shadows in the dark, clinging to flickers of warmth as the planet tried to erase them. This is where our story almost ended. We weren't hunted by beasts. We weren't slain in battle. We were nearly wiped out by something we couldn't even fight: the sky. The cold didn't come like a storm. It came like a verdict. Long after the ash settled, the damage remained. With less sunlight, the oceans cooled. Wind currents shifted. Glaciers, long sleeping in the north, began to awaken, and they moved. From the Arctic, sheets of ice hundreds of meters thick advanced like slow-motion death. Across Europe, Asia, and North America, they crushed everything in their path. Forests, rivers, mountains, scraped clean by frozen walls that groaned and cracked with every creeping kilometer. But the ice didn't stop in the north. It pushed the climate south into Africa. Rainforests in Central Africa dried into grasslands. Grasslands turned to dust. River systems that had once fed entire ecosystems vanished into cracked stone. And in the highlands of East Africa, humans found themselves trapped between the scorched equator and the frozen breath of the north. There was no good direction to run. To the north, drought and famine. To the south, cold winds and expanding desert. To the east and west, mountains, predators, and extinction. Cave sites like Blombos and Sebudu in modern-day South Africa tell the same story. Clusters of desperate people driven into stone refuges, relying on the barest flickers of culture and memory to survive. In these dark shelters, they worked bones into needles. They sharpened stone blades. They painted in ochre. Not for beauty, for survival, for sanity. Because outside those caves, Earth had turned into something alien. Familiar paths became barren. Hunting grounds offered nothing but bones. Skies remained gray even at noon. Nights stretched long and lethal. You couldn't outwalk the cold. You couldn't outthink the sky. You could only endure. And most didn't. This was not a metaphor. This was mathematics. At the height of the catastrophe, genetic bottlenecking occurred on a scale that still leaves scientists in stunned silence. Modern human DNA shows startling uniformity clues that suggest a moment when our diversity, our evolutionary options, were crushed into a single, narrow thread. The cause? A convergence of planetary disasters, the Toba eruption, the glacial advance, and the collapse of ecosystems from Indonesia to Ethiopia, all at once, all inescapable. And the effect? A population crash so severe, it's possible that only 1,000 to 2,000 Homo sapiens survived through it all. The rest, entire bands, cultures, genetic lines extinguished in the wind. Imagine it. A world once scattered with human tribes, voices echoing across canyons and coasts, suddenly reduced to a whisper in the dark. A few hundred in one valley, a few dozen in another, unaware of each other's survival. Every fire could be the last one on Earth. The fossils speak, but they do not comfort. In the Omo Valley, East Africa, early human remains are found in dry, remote refuges. Hints of once lush lands turned skeletal. Shell middens suggest coastal scavenging. Bone fragments show signs of starvation, long bones cracked open to suck out the marrow. Some skulls are fractured in ways that raise darker questions, violence born not from war, but from necessity. The Ice Age didn't just squeeze our numbers. It crushed our margin for error. One bad hunt, one lost fire, one poisoned root. Any mistake could end an entire bloodline. We were not surviving. We were suspended, dangling over an abyss, holding on by our fingernails. And still, somehow, something endured. What does it take to survive when the world itself wants you dead? Not brute strength, not teeth, not speed. What it takes is memory, pattern recognition, strategy, adaptation. Under the crushing weight of famine, cold, and extinction, our ancestors began to think differently. The pressure didn't just shape our bodies, it reshaped our minds. In the caves of Sabadu, archaeologists have found layers of ash, hearths stacked like pages of a diary. Within them, tools, microliths, bone awls, signs of complex planning. Not just point and stab weapons, but composite tools, barbed tips, designed for efficient kills. And then there's the ochre. On rock walls, they smeared pigment in repeating patterns, crosshatches, spirals, sigils. These were not idle doodles. These were symbols, rituals, maybe prayers. Proof that the human brain, under extreme pressure, was becoming something it had never been before. Abstract, symbolic, dangerous. This was not the evolution of muscle. It was the evolution of consciousness. Why did we bury our dead with red ochre and beads? Why did we spend precious time painting instead of hunting? Because meaning itself became a survival tool. The cold had stripped us of everything else: shelter, food, numbers. But it couldn't strip imagination, and imagination became our weapon. While Neanderthals hunted with brute force, Homo sapiens began to trap, to lure, to predict animal movement, to plan hunts that spanned days. We remembered where the herds had passed the year before. We remembered which plant had poisoned someone's brother. We passed these memories through story, through sound, through flame-lit whispers in caves. And that was the turning point. Not when we built fire, but when we built language. The cold tried to freeze us. We responded by thinking faster than it could kill. It didn't happen all at once. The cold loosened its grip over thousands of years, retreating inch by inch as the Earth's orbit shifted, as volcanic skies cleared, as sunlight began to warm the bones of a frozen planet once more. But by the time the glaciers pulled back, the damage was done. We had survived, but only just. The herds began to return. Grasses crept back over dead lands. Rivers flowed again, carving through valleys once buried beneath ice. And out of the caves came a new kind of human, not stronger, not faster, but haunted. The survivors of the bottleneck carried the memory of extinction in their blood, the fear, the hunger, the trauma coded into every heartbeat. They didn't rebuild the world. They relearned it step by cautious step. We see it in the sudden explosion of culture that followed stone circles, figurines, burial mounds. Not luxuries, memorials, warnings. Because somewhere deep in their marrow, those first post-Ice Age humans remembered what the world could do, what it had done. And they left messages, in ochre, in bone, in myth. Legends of a long darkness, of a sky without sun, of beasts that vanished in fire that refused to burn. Even now, tens of thousands of years later, those echoes haven't left us. They live in our fear of the cold, in our obsession with fire, in the way we gather in the dark and tell stories, not just to entertain, but to survive. Because what nearly killed us made us. We think of ourselves as conquerors of nature. We build cities on coastlines, grow crops in deserts, burn oil pulled from the bones of ancient forests. But we forget what came before us, what nearly ended us. Every civilization ever built, Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, China, rises after the Ice Age ends, not before. Only after the cold retreats do we see the flicker of agriculture, the taming of animals, the rise of cities. Why? Because before that, we were too busy surviving. We were hiding from the wind, huddling near fire, eating roots and marrow and scraping every last calorie from a dying world. Civilization isn't the product of genius. It's the product of breathing room. And even then, the scars remained. They remain now. Modern humans still show signs of that bottleneck. We are one of the least genetically diverse species on the planet. We all descend from those few who crawled through the Ice Age alive. A single catastrophe, a change in orbit, a volcanic eruption, a rapid shift in ocean currents, and it could all return. The cold, the dark, the silence. We don't control the Earth. We exist between disasters. Everything we've built stands on a grave of those who didn't make it, and that grave is wide. Beneath the frozen caps of Greenland and Antarctica, time waits. Ice doesn't die. It retreats. It remembers. Deep within its layers are records of every breath we've ever taken, every extinction we've narrowly escaped. A planetary diary written in snowflakes, compressing the weight of 1,000,000 years into silence. And somewhere in that silence it watches. We live in an illusion of stability, warm homes, glowing screens, grocery stores lit through the night. But that's not normal. That's not guaranteed. That's just now. For most of our existence, we've been prey. Not to lions or leopards, but to temperature, to climate, to the slow, grinding violence of a planet that does not care if we survive. And when the next shift comes, when the sun flickers, or the ocean currents stall, or fire erupts from the earth again, The cold will return, not out of malice, not for revenge, but because that's what it does. The Ice Age never really ended. It only stepped back to let us forget what it's capable of. The next time the sky darkens, the next time the wind dies, the next time the fire refuses to catch, will we be ready? Or will we finally become what we were always close to being, another layer beneath the ice? Subscribe to MystiFeed.